The bed cost $43. Kelvin remembers because he checked the price 3 times, making sure it was worth it. Memory foam, machine washable, rated 5 stars. My rescue dog loves this, one review said. Another, finally sleeps through the night. $43 to fix whatever had been broken in Willow before she'd come home. Except Willow wasn't broken. She was trained. Kelvin didn't realize that until he set the bed down in the living room and watched her reaction. Or lack of one. No excitement. No curiosity. Just this slow, measured approach, one paw, then another, like she was walking toward something dangerous instead of something soft. 3 feet away, she stopped. Kelvin smiled, encouraging. Go ahead, girl. It's yours. Willow dropped. Not sat. Not laid down. Dropped. Chest slammed to the floor. Front legs stretched forward. Head pressed low in a bow so deep it looked painful. The gray stuffed toy she'd been holding fell from her mouth and rolled an inch forward. She didn't pick it back up. She just stayed there, frozen, eyes locked on the bed like it might explode. What are you doing? Kelvin laughed nervously, trying to make sense of it. It's okay. Come on. Willow bowed lower. Her whole body started shaking. That's when the laugh died in Kelvin's throat. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't fear of something new. This was a memory. The shelter had warned him Willow was sensitive. They'd said she'd been through a lot, but didn't elaborate. Privacy, they'd said. Fresh start, they'd said. But looking at her now, this small dog bowing to an inanimate object like it could hurt her, Kelvin realized they hadn't told him the half of it. Somewhere in Willow's life, before the shelter, before the rescue, before him, someone had taught her that comfort wasn't free, that safety had rules, that before you could rest, you had to submit. And she'd learned it so well, she couldn't stop. Even here, even now, even when no one was asking her to. Kelvin's stomach twisted. He crouched down slowly, careful not to startle her. Willow's eyes tracked him, but her body didn't move. The bow held firm. I'm not them, he said, voice cracking slightly. Whoever they were. I'm not them. Willow blinked. Once, twice. She didn't believe him yet. Kelvin understood then that this wasn't going to be a rescue story about saving a dog. This was going to be a story about waiting, about proving, day after day, that kindness didn't have a punchline, that comfort didn't need permission, that bowing to survive wasn't necessary anymore. But first, Willow had to believe it. And right now, pressed against his floor with her eyes full of learned fear, she didn't. The bed sat untouched between them. $43. And the distance between trauma and healing felt like miles. The bed sat untouched between them. $43. And the distance between trauma and healing felt like miles. Real quick, this isn't a feel-good rescue story with a happy ending in 2 minutes. This is about what actually happens between broken and healed. The messy part nobody shows you. If you want the real story, not the highlight reel, subscribe now. Because what happens next is going to stay with you. Now let me tell you how this started. Let me tell you how Kelvin ended up here. Standing in his own living room, watching a dog bow to furniture, wondering what kind of hell leaves marks that deep. It started 3 hours earlier at the shelter. Kelvin hadn't been looking for a project. He'd wanted a companion. Something simple. A dog who'd greet him at the door. Maybe steal food off the counter. Bark at squirrels, normal dog things. But the moment he saw Willow pressed into the corner of that kennel, he knew normal wasn't happening. She was small. Smaller than the picture online had suggested. Brown and white patches across her face, floppy ears that looked too big for her head, and these eyes dark, deep, impossibly sad, that tracked his every movement like she was cataloging threats. Between her paws, clutched tight against her chest, was a gray stuffed toy, Some kind of animal worn down to almost nothing. No distinguishable features left. Just fabric and filling and desperation. She held it the way someone holds oxygen. "That's Willow," the shelter worker said softly beside him. "She's very quiet. Doesn't cause trouble. Doesn't take up space." Kelvin crouched down. Willow didn't move. Didn't bark. Didn't even blink. "What's her story?" he asked. The worker hesitated. "We don't know much. She was found abandoned. No chip. No tags. She's been here 4 months." A pause. "She's easy. I just need patience." Easy. The word sat wrong in Kelvin's chest. Easy wasn't a personality trait. Easy was what you became when everything else got beaten out of you. "I'll take her," Kelvin said. The ride home was silent. Willow sat in the back seat, toy clamped in her mouth, eyes fixed on nothing. She didn't look out the window, didn't pant, didn't shift positions. She just existed, barely. When they got to the apartment, Kelvin carried in the supplies he'd bought earlier that week. Food bowls, treats, a leash, and the bed soft, plush, $43 worth of good intentions. He set it down in the living room, right by the couch where the afternoon light hit warm and golden. "Check it out, girl," Kelvin said, stepping back to give her space. Willow approached slowly, one careful paw in front of the other, toy still locked between her teeth. Her body language screamed caution. Ears back, tail tucked, shoulders hunched like she was trying to make herself smaller. Kelvin expected her to sniff it, circle it, maybe scratch at it a few times before testing it out. Instead, 3 feet from the bed, Willow stopped. She dropped the toy. Then she dropped herself. Chest hit the floor first. Then her head lowered so far her nose nearly touched the ground. Front legs stretched forward in perfect, practiced submission. Her eyes lifted just enough to watch Kelvin, wide and waiting and full of something that looked too much like fear. Kelvin's breath caught. This wasn't a dog exploring something new. This was a dog asking permission to survive. "It's okay," he said gently, voice barely above a whisper. "You can lie down. It's yours." Willow didn't move. The bow held. Her body started trembling, small, almost imperceptible shakes that traveled from her shoulders down to her paws. Kelvin's stomach dropped. Something in her had learned that comfort had to be earned. He took a step forward, reaching out slowly to touch the edge of the bed. Maybe to show her it was safe. Maybe to prove it wasn't a threat. Willow bowed even lower. Her chin pressed against the floor. Her eyes squeezed shut. And Kelvin realized with cold, creeping horror, she wasn't waiting for permission. She was waiting for punishment. The bowing didn't stop. Kelvin told himself it would. First day jitters, he thought. New environment, new person, new rules to learn. Give her time. Give her space. She'll settle. But Willow didn't settle. She orbited. She followed Kelvin everywhere, kitchen to living room to bedroom to bathroom, but always at a distance. 5 feet minimum. Close enough to track him. Far enough to disappear if needed. She never sat on the couch, even when Kelvin patted the cushions and called her up. Never stretched out in the sunbeam that cut across the living room floor every afternoon. Never sprawled the way dogs do when they finally feel safe. Legs loose, belly exposed, guard down. Instead, she stayed small, compact, curled so tight it looked painful. At night, she slept on the floor beside the untouched bed, body tucked into itself like she was trying to take up as little space as physically possible. The gray toy stayed clamped between her paws, even in sleep. And every single act of kindness, no matter how small, triggered the same response. The bow. Day 3, Kelvin filled her food bowl and set it down on the kitchen mat. "Come on, Willow. Breakfast." She approached slowly, eyes down, movements measured. When she reached the bowl, she stopped, looked up at Kelvin, then dropped into a bow head low, chest to floor, and held it for 5 full seconds before eating. Like she had to thank him first, or apologize, or prove she was grateful enough to deserve it. Kelvin's chest tightened. Day 5, he reached down to pet her while she sat near his feet. His hand was still 6 inches away when Willow flattened herself to the ground. Head down, eyes up, waiting. Kelvin froze. "I'm not going to hurt you," he whispered. Willow didn't move. The bow stayed locked in place until Kelvin pulled his hand back. Day 7, Kelvin called her name from across the room. "Willow, come here, girl." She came, but halfway across the living room, she dropped into that same submission. Chest pressed to the floor, legs stretched forward, and crawled the rest of the way on her belly. Like walking upright toward him was somehow wrong. Kelvin felt something crack inside his chest. This wasn't a dog. This was someone who'd learned that existing came with consequences. That every moment of comfort, every scrap of attention, every breath of safety had to be earned through submission. Willow didn't behave like an animal adapting to a new home. She behaved like someone afraid of being punished for taking up space. That night, Kelvin sat on the couch and watched her approach the bed for what must have been the 20th time that week. Same routine, same slow, cautious steps, same pause 3 feet away. Then the drop. But this time something was different. Willow's body wasn't just bowing. It was trembling. Her legs shook. Her shoulders quivered. Her breathing came fast and shallow, like the act of getting close to comfort was physically painful. She held the position for 10 seconds, 20, 30. Then she backed away, picked up her gray toy, and curled up on the floor beside the bed, right where she always slept. Kelvin stared at the untouched bed. $43. Memory foam. 5-star reviews. It might as well have been made of knives. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and tried to understand. What kind of past teaches a dog that a bed is something to fear? That comfort requires permission? That kindness is just another test you might fail? Willow's eyes opened briefly in the dim light. She looked at Kelvin, then at the bed. Then she closed her eyes again, body still trembling, and pressed herself tighter against the floor, like she was trying to disappear into it. And Kelvin realized with cold, sinking certainty, this wasn't going to be fixed with patience alone. This was going to require something else entirely, something he didn't know how to give yet. Kelvin couldn't sleep. 2 in the morning, laptop glowing in the dark, he typed the same search for the 3rd time. Why does my rescue dog bow before everything? The results came slowly, but when they did, they hit like a fist to the chest. Learned submission, appeasement behavior, trauma response in animals. He clicked through forum posts, rescue organization articles, veterinary behavioral studies. The words blurred together, but the message was clear. Animals didn't bow like Willow did naturally. They learned it. Through repetition, through necessity, through pain. One article stopped him cold. Dogs who exhibit extreme submission behaviors have often experienced environments where failing to submit resulted in punishment. The behavior becomes automatic, a survival mechanism. The dog isn't trying to be polite. The dog is trying not to get hurt. Kelvin's throat went tight. He closed the laptop and looked across the room. Willow was curled beside the bed, toy clutched tight, breathing soft and uneven in her sleep. Even unconscious, she looked tense. The next morning, Kelvin tried something different. He sat on the floor beside the bed and patted the fabric gently. "Willow, come here, girl. You can try it. I promise it's okay." Willow lifted her head from across the room. Her ears perked slightly. Curiosity, maybe, or memory. She stood, took one step forward, then another. Kelvin stayed still, hand resting on the bed, trying to radiate calm. Willow got within 2 feet. Then she froze. Completely, utterly, like someone had pressed pause on her entire body. Her eyes locked on the bed, on Kelvin's hand, on the space between them. "It's okay," Kelvin whispered. "I'm not mad. You're safe." Willow's legs started shaking. Then slowly, so slowly it looked painful, she lowered herself, not into the usual bow, deeper. Her entire body flattened against the floor. Chest, stomach, legs splayed wide. Head pressed down so hard her chin dug into the carpet. Eyes squeezed shut like she was bracing for impact. Kelvin's hand froze midair. This wasn't a submission. This was surrender. The kind you give when you've already lost. When fighting back isn't an option. When the only thing left to do is make yourself as small as possible and hope it ends quickly. Kelvin pulled his hand back. "No. No, Willow, you don't have to." But she held the position. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Waiting for something that wasn't coming. Waiting for the pain that, in her memory, always came after the kindness. Kelvin's stomach turned. She wasn't afraid of the bed. She was afraid of what came after it. Somewhere in Willow's past, someone had offered her comfort. A soft place. A moment of rest. And then, when she'd let her guard down, when she dared to believe she was safe, they'd hurt her, and she'd learned. Comfort wasn't a gift. It was bait. Kindness wasn't safe. It was a setup. And the only way to survive it was to submit so completely, so perfectly that maybe the punishment wouldn't come. Kelvin felt something break behind his ribs. Willow finally opened her eyes. She didn't move, just looked at him from her flattened position, entire body still trembling, asking a silent question. "Did I do it right? Am I good enough? Can I stop now?" Kelvin backed away slowly, giving her space. "You're okay," he said, voice cracking. "You're okay." Willow stayed frozen for another moment. Then, shakily, she pulled herself up and retreated to her corner. Toy between her paws, eyes wide, breath coming fast. The bed sat between them, untouched, and Kelvin understood. This wasn't a bed in Willow's mind. It was a test. One she'd failed before. One she was terrified of failing again. You feel that tightness in your chest right now? That need to know if Willow makes it? That's exactly why you need to subscribe. This channel tells stories that go deep, the trauma, the setbacks, the real healing. But YouTube only shows these to people who subscribe. If you need to see how this ends, hit that button right now. Because the next chapter changes everything. By week 3, Kelvin started to believe things were getting better. Willow ate her meals without hesitation now. She'd stopped leaving half the bowl untouched. Stopped acting like food might be taken away if she enjoyed it too much. She finished everything, licked the bowl clean, then looked up at Kelvin with something that almost resembled contentment. Progress. Her tail wagged now, short, tentative movements when Kelvin came home from work. Nothing enthusiastic, nothing big, but it was there. A small flag of hope raised in the space between fear and trust. More progress. She started greeting him at the door, not jumping or barking like other dogs might, but standing there waiting, toy in mouth, eyes a little less haunted than before. Kelvin took pictures, sent them to his sister with captions like, "She's settling in," and "Look at that tail wag." His sister replied, "She's beautiful. You're doing great." Kelvin wanted to believe it, but then he'd noticed the other thing. The thing that hadn't changed at all. Willow still bowed before every act of comfort. Before eating, even though she no longer hesitated, she'd drop into that familiar submission. Just for a moment. just long enough to ask permission she didn't need. Before Kelvin touched her, even gently, even after weeks of proving he wouldn't hurt her, she'd lower her head and flatten her ears. Before settling down for the night, she'd approach her usual spot beside the bed and pause, then bow, then curl up on the floor. Every single night. Kelvin watched it happen one evening, the routine so practiced it looked choreographed. Willow walked to her spot, toy in mouth, stopped, set the toy down carefully, then dropped into a bow head low, chest to floor, held it for 3 seconds, and finally curled into her tight little ball on the carpet. Right next to the bed she still refused to touch. Kelvin's stomach sank. She wasn't healing. She was just getting better at functioning around the trauma. The bed sat there, pristine and untouched, a $43 monument to everything Willow still couldn't accept. Comfort, safety, rest without conditions. Kelvin had started to wonder if she'd ever use it, if maybe some wounds went too deep, if maybe some lessons, once learned, couldn't be unlearned. 3 weeks and 4 days in, Kelvin decided to try again. He sat on the couch, watching Willow settle into her spot on the floor. She'd just finished her evening bow, just curled up with her toy, when Kelvin leaned forward and gently patted the bed. "Willow, come on, girl. Just try it. Once." Willow's eyes opened. She lifted her head slightly, ears perking at her name. Kelvin patted the bed again, softer this time. "It's okay. I promise." Willow stood slowly. The toy fell from between her paws. She took 1 step toward the bed, then another. Kelvin's heart lifted. Maybe this was it. Maybe tonight was different. Maybe. Willow's legs started shaking. Then she froze. Her entire body went rigid. Eyes wide, locked on the bed like it had just moved, like it had just shown teeth. "Willow!" She dropped, not into the usual bow. She collapsed. Her legs gave out beneath her and she hit the floor hard. Belly flat, head pressed against the carpet, body convulsing with tremors so violent Kelvin could see them from across the room. A sound came from her throat, small, broken, not a whimper, a whine, high-pitched, desperate, the kind of sound that comes from somewhere too deep to name. Kelvin's chest seized. "Willow, no, I'm sorry." But she didn't move, just stayed there, flattened against the floor, shaking so hard her toy rolled away from her paws. And Kelvin realized with cold, devastating clarity, she wasn't getting better. She was getting better at hiding how broken she still was. The bed wasn't a gift. It was a trigger, and he'd just pushed her too far. Kelvin didn't move from the couch. He just watched Willow shake on the floor, her small body racked with tremors that wouldn't stop, and felt utterly helpless. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." But sorry didn't fix anything. Sorry didn't erase whatever memory had just flooded through her when he'd patted that bed. Sorry didn't undo the training that had taught her comfort was dangerous. Willow stayed flattened for a full minute. Then slowly, painfully, she pulled herself up and retreated to the corner, as far from the bed as she could get while still being in the same room. She picked up her toy and pressed it against her chest. Her eyes stayed on the bed, wide, unblinking, terrified. Kelvin's throat burned. He didn't try again that night, or the next, or the one after that. He let Willow set the pace. Let her bow when she needed to. Let her sleep on the floor. Let her exist in whatever small space felt survivable. But 5 nights later, something changed. Kelvin was reading on the couch, half asleep, when he heard movement. He looked up. Willow was standing in the middle of the living room, a toy abandoned near her usual spot. She was facing the bed, body tense, ears flat against her head, just standing there, staring. Kelvin held his breath. Willow took 1 step forward, then stopped. Another step. Stopped. She got within 3 feet of the bed, closer than she'd been in days, and her legs started shaking. "It's okay," Kelvin said softly, not moving. "You don't have to." But Willow didn't back away this time. She just stood there, trembling, staring at the bed like it was a test she desperately wanted to pass but didn't know how. Then she took another step, 2 feet away now. Her breathing went shallow, fast. One more step, close enough to touch the fabric. Willow froze, completely, her body locked in place. Muscles rigid, tail tucked so tight it disappeared between her legs. Eyes glazed over like she wasn't fully present anymore. Like she'd left her body and gone somewhere else. Somewhere worse. Kelvin sat up slowly. "Willow!" She didn't respond. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe. Then, all at once, her legs gave out. She dropped so fast Kelvin barely saw it happen. One moment standing, the next crumpled on the floor in the deepest bow he'd ever seen. Her chin hit the carpet hard. Her front legs stretched forward until her shoulders flattened completely. Her back legs splayed wide. Body pressed so low it looked like she was trying to sink through the floor itself. And she started shaking. Not trembling. Shaking. Violent, full-body convulsions that rattled through her frame like she was being electrocuted. "Willow!" Kelvin moved toward her, but stopped when her eyes rolled back slightly. This wasn't fear. This wasn't a submission. This was a memory. Something in her brain had taken her back. Back to wherever this started. Back to the place where beds meant pain, where comfort was a trap, where bowing this low was the only thing that kept you alive. This wasn't obedience. This was a memory. Kelvin's hands shook. He'd been trying to fix this with patience, with gentleness, with time. But time didn't erase trauma. Time just taught you how to live around it. Willow needed something else. She needed proof that the rules had changed, that the bed wasn't what it used to be, that submitting wouldn't save her because there was nothing to be saved from anymore. Kelvin looked at Willow, still frozen in that horrible bow, still shaking, still lost somewhere he couldn't reach, and made a decision. He stood slowly. I walked past her, past the bed. Then he lay down on the floor, right beside it, not on the bed, on the floor, at her level, where she'd been sleeping for weeks, where she felt safe. Kelvin stretched out on the carpet, arms at his sides, and stared at the ceiling. "I'm not asking you to do anything," he said quietly. "I'm just here." Willow's shaking slowed, just slightly. Her head lifted an inch, still bowed, but not flattened anymore. Kelvin didn't move, didn't look at her, didn't reach out. He just lay there and waited. Kelvin stayed on the floor, the carpet pressed against his back, rough and slightly uncomfortable, but he didn't shift, didn't adjust, didn't even breathe too loudly. He just existed there, quiet, still, present but not demanding. For the first time since Willow had come home, Kelvin wasn't asking her to do anything, wasn't patting the bed, wasn't calling her over, wasn't trying to fix her or help her or guide her towards some version of healing he thought she needed. He was just there, on her level, in her world. Minutes passed. 5, 10. Kelvin lost count. The silence stretched between them, heavy but not oppressive. The kind of quiet that holds space instead of filling it. Willow's shaking slowed further, then stopped. Kelvin could hear her breathing now. Still fast, still shallow, but steadying. Gradually, carefully, he kept his eyes on the ceiling. Didn't turn his head. Didn't check on her. He just breathed. In. Slow and even. The kind of breathing that says, "I'm not a threat. I'm not waiting for anything. I'm not going to hurt you." More minutes passed. Then Kelvin heard it. Movement. Soft, tentative. The slight scrape of paws against carpet. Willow was shifting. Kelvin's heart hammered against his ribs, but he forced himself to stay still. Stay calm. Give her whatever she needs. Another sound. Closer this time. She was moving toward him. Not quickly. Not confidently. But moving. Kelvin counted his breaths to keep from reacting. 1, 2, 3. Then, in his peripheral vision, he saw her. Willow had lifted her head. Not all the way. Not with confidence. But it was up. And she wasn't bowing. For the first time in 3 weeks, Willow's chest wasn't pressed to the floor. Her legs weren't stretched in submission. Her chin wasn't tucked in fear. She was just sitting, slightly hunched, still tense, toy abandoned somewhere behind her. But sitting, looking at him. Kelvin's throat tightened. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even let his eyes shift toward her fully. He just lay there and let her see him. Vulnerable, non-threatening, at her mercy instead of the other way around. Willow's ears twitched forward. Just slightly. Her head tilted, like she was trying to figure out what this meant, what the catch was. Why was the human on the floor instead of towering above her? Asking for something, expecting something. Kelvin gave her nothing to decode. No command. No invitation. No pressure. Just presence. Willow's breathing slowed more. Her shoulders dropped half an inch. She blinked. Once. Twice. Then she looked at the bed. Kelvin's pulse spiked, but he kept his body loose. Kept his breathing even. Willow's gaze moved from the bed to Kelvin. Back to the bed. Back to Kelvin. Like she was asking a question she didn't have words for. Is this a trick? Are you testing me? What happens if I move closer? Kelvin didn't answer. Couldn't answer. He just breathed and stayed still and trusted that maybe the absence of control was the answer she'd been looking for all along. Willow's tail twitched. Not a wag. Just a flicker of something. Then she shifted her weight forward. Just an inch. Kelvin's heart stopped. Willow paused. I watched him. Waited for the reaction, the correction, the punishment, the sign that she'd done something wrong. Nothing came. Kelvin stayed exactly as he was. Willow's ears lifted slightly. And then, slowly, so slowly it felt like the whole room was holding its breath. She took a step forward, toward the bed, toward Kelvin, toward the thing she'd been terrified of for weeks. Her body didn't shake this time, didn't freeze, didn't bow. She just moved. One paw in front of the other. Closer. Kelvin felt tears sting the corners of his eyes, but he blinked them back and kept staring at the ceiling. Don't move. Don't ruin this. Let her come to you. Another step. Willow was beside the bed now, right next to it, close enough to touch the fabric if she wanted to. She stopped, looked down at Kelvin, and for the first time since she'd come home, her eyes didn't look terrified. They looked curious. Willow took another breath. Then she stepped forward again. Willow stood beside the bed, staring down at the soft fabric like it was the edge of a cliff. Kelvin didn't breathe, didn't move, didn't even think too loudly in case somehow that would shatter whatever fragile moment this was. Willow shifted her weight, lifted one paw slightly, testing, considering. Then she placed it on the bed. Just one paw, tentative, barely any pressure, like she was checking if it would hurt her, if it would disappear, if something terrible would happen the second she made contact. Nothing happened. The bed just sat there, soft, neutral, safe. Willow's ears flicked forward. She lifted her other front paw and placed it on the bed beside the first. 2 paws now, half her body still on the floor, half suspended in the act of trust. Kelvin's chest ached. His eyes burned. He kept them fixed on the ceiling, every muscle in his body screaming to look, to watch, to witness this, but he stayed frozen. This wasn't about him. This was Willow's moment. She held the position for several seconds, front paws on the bed, back paws on the floor, like she was still deciding, still waiting for the catch, still expecting something to go wrong. But Kelvin didn't move, didn't speak, didn't ask her to finish or retreat or do anything except whatever she needed to do. Willow's back legs shifted, and then slowly, agonizingly slowly, she pulled herself up. One back paw, then the other, all four paws on the bed now, standing on the thing she'd been terrified of for 3 weeks. Kelvin heard her breathing, fast and uncertain, heard the slight rustle of fabric as she adjusted her weight. Willow stood there for a moment, rigid, like she was still braced for impact. Then something in her body softened. Her legs bent slightly, her shoulders dropped, and she lowered herself down, not into a bow, into a curl. She tucked her legs beneath her, pressed her body into the soft memory foam, and let her head rest on the fabric instead of the hard, cold floor she'd been sleeping on for weeks. No submission, no fear, just rest. Kelvin felt something break open in his chest. A sob tried to force its way up his throat, but he swallowed it down, kept himself still, kept giving her the space to exist without performance. She wasn't asking anymore. She wasn't seeking permission, wasn't apologizing for taking up space, wasn't bowing to prove she deserved comfort. She was just being a dog, on a bed, resting, the most normal thing in the world, and yet the most extraordinary thing Kelvin had witnessed in his entire life. Willow shifted slightly, adjusting her position. Her body relaxed incrementally. First her shoulders, then her back, then finally her legs, which stretched out just a little instead of staying tucked tight beneath her. She wasn't small anymore. She was just the right size. Kelvin stayed on the floor beside her, still not moving, tears sliding silently down the sides of his face toward his ears. He didn't care. Willow's breathing began to even out. Slower now, deeper. Her eyelids grew heavy. She blinked once, twice, like she was fighting sleep, still not quite ready to let her guard down completely. But then her eyes drifted closed, and Willow exhaled, long and slow and full, a breath that sounded like every ounce of tension she'd been carrying for weeks, maybe months, maybe her entire life was finally leaving her body, like she'd been holding it in all this time, waiting, and now, finally, she could let it go. The room went quiet except for the sound of her breathing, steady, calm, peaceful, and Kelvin lay there on the floor beside her, still not moving, just listening to the sound of a dog who'd learned to rest, for the first time, without asking, without apologizing, without bowing, just resting, because she finally believed she was allowed to. The first night became the second, then the third, then a week. Willow slept on the bed every night after that, not hesitantly, not with the slow, agonizing approach that had marked that first breakthrough. She just went to bed, like it had always been hers, like she'd never spent 3 weeks terrified of it. Kelvin would finish washing dishes or reading or whatever occupied his evenings, and when he'd look over, there she'd be, curled up on the memory foam, head resting on her paws, eyes half closed in that drowsy, content way dogs get when they feel safe. It gutted him every time, in the best way. 2 weeks after that first night on the floor, Kelvin came home from work to find Willow stretched out on the bed, actually stretched, legs extended, body loose, taking up the entire length of the mattress instead of curling into that tight, compact ball she'd maintained for so long. She looked up when he walked in, tail wagging, not tentatively anymore, but with actual enthusiasm, and made no move to shrink herself. Kelvin stopped in the doorway, groceries still in hand. "Look at you," he whispered. Willow's tail wagged harder. 3 days later, he walked into the living room to find her on her back. Belly up, legs in the air, head tilted at an awkward angle against the pillow she'd apparently claimed as her own. The most vulnerable position a dog can take. The universal sign of trust. Kelvin's throat tightened. He pulled out his phone, snapped a picture, and sent it to his sister with shaking hands. She replied immediately, "Oh my God, Kelvin. She's healing." He stared at the photo for a long time. She was. For weeks after the breakthrough, Willow started greeting Kelvin at the door differently. Not just standing there, waiting quietly with her toy. She'd prance. Actually prance. Bouncing slightly on her front paws, tail wagging in full sweeping arcs, a small playbow dipping her front half down while her back legs stayed up. Playbow. Not submission. Invitation. The first time it happened, Kelvin nearly dropped his keys. "You want to play?" Willow bounced again, then grabbed a toy. Not the gray one, but a rope he'd bought weeks ago that she'd never touched, and shook it back and forth, eyes bright. Kelvin laughed. Actually laughed, loud and surprised and full of something that felt dangerously close to joy. They played tug-of-war for 10 minutes. Willow growled. Playfully, not fearfully, and pulled hard, and when Kelvin let her win, she pranced around the living room like she'd conquered the world. No bowing, no fear, just a dog playing because playing felt safe now. 5 weeks in, Kelvin noticed something else. The gray toy, the one Willow had clutched between her paws every single day since she'd arrived, the one she'd carried like oxygen, like the only thing in the world that couldn't hurt her, was sitting abandoned in the corner. Kelvin stared at it. Willow was on the bed, chewing a newer toy, completely unbothered. She didn't need the gray one anymore. Didn't need the security object that had kept her tethered to survival mode for who knows how long. She had other things now. The bed, the apartment, Kelvin, safety. Kelvin picked up the gray toy carefully, like it was something sacred. In a way, it was. This thing had held Willow together when nothing else could. He placed it on a shelf, not thrown away, just retired, and turned back to look at her. Willow glanced up, met his eyes, and went back to chewing. Unbothered. Secure. Home. That evening, Kelvin sat on the couch reviewing his day, mentally running through work emails and tomorrow's schedule, when something struck him. He froze mid-thought, looked at Willow, sprawled across the bed with her legs twitching in sleep. Looked at the spot on the floor where she used to bow every single night. I looked at the food bowl in the kitchen, the doorway where he'd come home, the space beside the couch where she now sat freely. And he realized she hadn't bowed all day. Not once. Not before eating. Not before being touched. Not before settling down for the night. She just existed, without asking permission, without apologizing, without performing submission to earn the right to take up space. Kelvin's eyes burned. Willow twitched again in her sleep, legs running through some dream, and let out a small, contented sigh. She was dreaming, not bowing, just dreaming. And Kelvin sat there in the dim light of his living room, watching a dog sleep peacefully on a $43 bed, and understood that this was what healing actually looked like. Not perfect, not without scars, but free. 6 weeks and 2 days after Willow came home, Kelvin was reading in bed when he heard her jump down. Not unusual. Sometimes she'd get water or stretch, or just move around before settling back in. But this time, she walked over to his side of the bed and stopped. Kelvin looked down. Willow was staring up at him, eyes clear and calm in the lamplight. No fear, no tension, just present. "You okay, girl?" She didn't move, just held his gaze for a long moment, like she was trying to communicate something she didn't have words for. Then, Slowly, deliberately, Willow lowered herself. Chest to floor. Head down. Front legs stretched forward. A bow. Perfect. Practiced. Familiar. Kelvin's heart stopped. No, not now. Not after everything. Not after she'd been doing so well. Sleeping peacefully, playing, existing without fear for weeks. But then Willow did something different. She held the bow for only a second. Just one. Then she lifted her head and gently, so gently it barely made a sound, rested her chin on the edge of the bed, right beside Kelvin's hand, and exhaled. Long, slow, complete. Not the exhale of fear or submission or survival. The exhale of goodbye. Kelvin's breath caught. This wasn't a trauma response. This wasn't a memory. This was closure. Willow stayed there, head resting on the bed, eyes soft and half closed, breathing steady and calm, like she was saying, I know where I came from. I know what I learned, but I don't need it anymore. Kelvin's hand trembled as he slowly, carefully, reached down and rested it on her head. Willow didn't flinch, didn't pull away, didn't bow lower. She just leaned into the touch, eyes drifting closed, and let herself be held. Kelvin's vision blurred. You're okay now, he whispered, voice breaking. You're safe. You don't have to ask anymore. Willow's tail gave one small wag. Then she pulled back, turned around, and jumped back onto the bed. She circled twice. Casual, easy, like she'd been doing it her whole life, and flopped down in her spot with a contented sigh. No hesitation, no fear, no bow, just a dog going to bed, because that's what dogs do when they're home. Kelvin stared at her for a long time, tears streaming silently down his face. That was the last time Willow ever bowed. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into a year. Willow grew into herself in ways Kelvin hadn't thought possible. She played hard, barked at delivery drivers, stole food off the counter when she thought he wasn't looking, demanded belly rubs and got offended when they stopped too soon. She became normal, beautifully, perfectly, messily normal. The gray toy stayed on the shelf, a quiet reminder of where she'd come from. But Willow never looked at it. I didn't need it. Had outgrown the version of herself who'd needed something to hold onto just to survive. The bed, that $43 bed that had once represented every terrible thing she'd learned about comfort, became her favorite place in the world. She'd sprawl across it dramatically, hog the pillows, refused to move even when Kelvin needed to change the sheets. It was hers, and she knew it. Some nights, Kelvin would sit on the couch and watch her sleep, legs twitching, dreaming whatever dogs dream about, completely at peace, and he'd think about that first night. The bowing, the shaking, the terror that had been beaten into her so deeply she couldn't even accept kindness without apologizing for it first. And then he'd look at her now, snoring slightly, taking up more space than her small body should physically be able to occupy, absolutely certain of her place in this home, and feel something crack open in his chest all over again. She didn't have to earn comfort anymore. She didn't have to submit to exist. She didn't have to bow to prove she deserved safety. She finally believed deeply, truly, completely that she was allowed to have it. Not because she'd performed well enough. Not because she'd been good enough. But because she was. And that was enough. $43 for a bed. But what Kelvin really gave Willow was permission to heal without earning it. If this story broke something open in you, subscribe now. Every week I bring stories like this, real, messy, the kind that remind you healing is possible. Next week, a cat who stopped eating after her owner died, and the nurse who figured out why. If Willow hit you this hard, that one's going to destroy you. Subscribe. I'll see you there.